Welcome to the Make Each Click Count podcast. This is your host, Andy Spleckel, and today we have a special guest who's no stranger to the worlds of e-commerce or digital marketing. Phil Rivers started his entrepreneur journey by selling products on obscure message boards and building email lists. Despite initial million-dollar success, it eventually fizzled out. Phil's resilience then led him to New York City with hardly any money and no connections. After gaining experience in startups and finding unfulfilled, he returned to his roots and founded a marketing agency specializing in email marketing. The agency grew over 50 global employees and seven-figure sales before it was successfully sold. Now, Phil applies his expertise in finding and vetting global marketing talent to help other companies grow. Today, we're going to delve into Phil's remarkable journey and uncover his insights on how to hire top remote marketers. Hey, welcome to the show, Phil.
What up, Andy? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, now your journey from selling products on message boards to building $1 million business and then moving to New York City was incredible. Can you share a bit more about some of the challenges you faced in this transition and how they really shaped your business hirings?
Yeah, so if I think to back in the day, I was in college and I was like, I don't know, I was always like had an entrepreneurial spirit. And so my buddy and I designed t-shirts that coincided with the release of Nike Dunks, which were very popular shoes back in 2005. And at the time, like there was no Shopify. I don't even think Shopify existed yet, but so we just sold them on obscure message boards. NikeTalk.com is one specific one. So back then, I just got really good at building a list and sending emails because that was kind of all that you could do. And I guess as I matured as a man, as a marketer, I sort of have just been sort of like stuck in my ways and just like I'll continue to play within the modality of email because I know it so well. So that was like sort of like the origin story of it all. When I was moving to New York, I mean, at the time I was selling, I had a product that was, I would say, Cartier inspired jewelry. And again, I just went back to what I knew the best, which was, building a list and sending emails. I'm not sure if that answers your question specifically, Andy. So if not, give me a follow up on it. But
Well,
yeah,
so you
that's sort of
so
how I got started.
yeah, so I mean you built a team of 50 people. Were they all virtual? And what year was that?
Yeah, so that was much later. When I moved to New York, that was 2012. When I started building the agency, that was 2018, 2019. The entire team was remote. When I first started out, I was very sort of like, how do I want to say, like America, like I'm only hiring American, right?
Mhm.
And I thought I was like doing my duty as an American to employ Americans. But then as the business matured and I would say, more adept at evaluating talent and really became more conscious about like running a business and more specifically the profit and loss, I
Mhm.
started to look more like internationally for talent. And there's, pros, I would say pros and cons that come with both. But as the agency progressed in age and experience and myself as well, I started to hire overseas more and more.
When you say overseas, what countries were you typically hiring in?
So I would say, great question. I'm geographically agnostic. I think that there's like, I would say like nuances that come into play, like time zone, for example. That's important to some people, not to others, or it's important for some roles, not for others. Predominantly, I was hiring in Latin America, occasionally Eastern Europe, even less so, sort of like the Middle East. But one area that I don't tend to look for talent, where a lot of people do, is the Philippines.
Hmm.
Specific reason being is that in terms of like the types of roles that I tend to source talent for myself or on behalf of others, I would say they require, I don't know, problem solving and things, creative thinking in such a way that what I found from my experience is talent from the Philippines that's not necessarily their strong suit. Just like I think that's more of like a cultural thing. And to be honest with you, dude, I think it's also partially like cruel to if you're going to ask someone to work local hours to have
Mhm.
them work in the middle of the night on over a consistent period of time. I think it's a lot to ask of a person. So those are my main reasons for not going Philippines.
It's very interesting because I know both the Philippines and India seem to be the most popular choices when people look at virtual assistants.
Yeah, and so one thing to be clear is like I would say the roles that I tend to hire for aren't VAs. They're not virtual assistants. They have more expertise in terms of like what they do. So because I was building a marketing agency, I was always looking for people that had marketing experience, right?
Hmm.
And so in through that lens, I would say that like what I would call a marketing generalist, you might call a VA. So, but I think, nomenclature is important. But a marketing generalist, maybe they're an inch deep and a mile wide on a bunch of things related to marketing, but
Mhm.
they're more so like indexed towards marketing respective stuff, not managing a calendar or booking flights.
So after you sold your agency, what led you into really specializing in helping companies enhance their remote workforce?
I would say that, when I started building the agency, I had no experience really hiring anyone. So I was sort of like all self-taught. They don't teach, I went to business school. They don't teach the stuff in school. So it's like trial by fire sort of a thing. But I got pretty good at being able to find and vet and then get, I would say, talent ramped up onto a team so much so that they contribute, but also like feel like they're a part of the team, especially considering that no, there's no four walls that all of us are in at any given time. And so I just sharpened my sword and got good at it. And I also know because I have a lot of friends that own businesses, most of them, I don't know, it's friction for them. It's hard for them to do it. And I know that this is a common pain point for a lot of people that own businesses is they don't know how to do it. And quite frankly, it's very difficult to find the time to sharpen your sword at this thing. So I figured, I have the systems, the processes, the know-how. I know what good marketing talent looks like because I've sourced for it myself countless times. Let me help people do this thing that I'm sort of like, I don't know, have an unfair advantage at.
Now, do you have a list of workers that you can, that's in your Rolodex that you match with a client if they come to you and say, I'm looking for somebody to do this? Maybe you worked with them in the past with a different client or how are you finding them cold every time? I mean, how
So
does that?
great question. So it's a little bit of both. So I build a talent pool. So in terms of like the way that I work with clients now, there's I would say a handful of roles that is the bell curve of what we source for, all marketing related, which allows me to be able to see a lot of patterns with the folks that we do vet, and to be able to build a bench so that as people come on, clients come on board and need help with a certain thing, we have people that are pre-vetted or in the vetting process because we sort of limit the focus in terms of the roles that we source for. And by no means are a jack of all trades, master of none. And that being said, there are obviously instances in which the benches aren't as deep, or a client has a request or a demand for something that that falls outside of the bell curve of most of the roles that we place for, at which point we'll source them cold. So I guess it's a little bit of both, but for efficiency's sake and the best experience for the client and the talent, I really try and build a talent pool that we can tap into on an as needed basis.
Now, how do you or how does a company, one of your clients, retain talent if they're working out well? I mean, I know a lot of times in our experience with our agency, well, we'll use some freelancers, but it seems that they always continue to look for the next best opportunity, and longevity seems to be an issue with virtual employees.
Well, I think that I think what is that Charlie Munger? He said like, "Show me the incentives, and I'll show you the outcome," sort of thing. And so, like you mentioned the word freelancers, for example, and I think that like if someone is being employed, it doesn't matter if they're domestic or international, and it's under the umbrella of um, freelance or sort of like temporary, I feel like their mind is always open to other opportunities because they know their time with whomever is the person that they're freelance or the company they're freelancing for is finite. It's limited. And so I think like sort of like the optics or what gets communicated to the talent in terms of the working relationship is important. And then I think also to go a step further is like putting incentivizations and putting like incentives in place for the talent so that they want to stay. But I think that's to your point, Andy, that's one thing that gets overlooked a lot is like human element of like how are things communicated. And also like a lot of people tend to forget that on the other side of it is a human, right? They're a person, doesn't matter if they're in Indonesia or Latin America, Canada, or Iowa for that matter. But if you think about it from the position of like, I don't know, having empathy for the person and figuring out like what they want and how do we as the employer put them in a position to achieve that. I think that will help like a lot of these sort of arrangements that you describe in terms of people get brought on, but they tend not to stay very long because they're always looking somewhere else. Usually that means that they just don't feel very confident that they're going to have like there's a place for them over time wherever they are.
So, what type of roles do you specialize in at Talent HQ?
So I would say all marketing. So like marketing generalist, or what you would maybe call a VA, but with a marketing lens. Again, to go back to that example I said before, inch deep, mile wide on a bunch of stuff. Social media, so that could be like organically, so social media manager or community manager. Media buyers, so that regardless of platform, Meta, Google Ads, Pinterest, Amazon, what have you. Content or copywriting, so like SEO, blogs, writing social media posts, things like that. Creative, that could be like a video editor or graphic designer. And then I would say like operations. So this one is more like marketing ops related than obviously
Hmm.
marketing. But through the lens of agency, someone to either manage the project management internally and or liaison with clients. That could be customer service. That could be some CRM coordinator related tasks. But those are the ones that we tend to focus on fulfilling the most for folks.
And so how does it work? The companies, you find the talent for them, you do the payment, you just hand them off. I mean, how does the whole process work?
Great question. So within the like the recruiting industry generally, there's usually like placement. So someone recruits the talent, they take a finder's fee, and the talent becomes a contractor or employee of the company. The other is staffing, that is kind of common now, but where the company sources the talent, but they stay on the payroll of the recruiting company, and the recruiting company adds some margin on top of whatever the salary is of that person. I would say both have their pros and cons for the company and for the client. The way that we structured it is, personally, I don't like the staffing model per se, just because the talent has two bosses, and usually the staffing company is taking, especially if it's over a long time horizon, they're taking such a handsome vig, if you will, on the head
Yeah.
of the talent. It's only a matter of time until the client's like, I'm paying too much for what I'm getting, and I think it's just a recipe for having a friction in terms of the client relationship. On the recruiting side, traditionally, what people tend to do is they charge 30 or 35% of the first year's salary, which again, if you think about the math, let's just say the salary is $30,000 a year. That sounds cheap relative to Americans. However,
Hmm.
the placement fee would be 10 grand in that case, which so then it becomes cost prohibitive for a lot of companies to do it, right? And so going back to what I said, I don't know, 5 minutes ago, in that it's the most people don't have the experience nor the time or the desire to sharpen their sword to be able to find and vet the talent. And so I want to solve that pain for them. A lot of people aren't willing to pay 10 grand plus for it either. They'd rather be like, screw it, I'll just eat it myself. Maybe
Yeah.
it's not as good. Maybe I have a lot of headaches along the way, but I don't have to pay 10K. So what we do is just a straight, simple, flat fee to recruit the talent. But then they're the contractor, or they work for the talent. Excuse me, they work for the client directly at whatever their true salary is. Oftentimes, it's usually between like 11.99, 1,199, and 18.99 a month, generally speaking.
Now, you know, virtual working is just exploded since COVID. How have you found, you had mentioned when you first started, you were thinking, I'm just going to hire workers in America. You changed that due to probably pricing, I'm guessing. How do you find people's receptions on clients when they come in? Are most of them open to hiring somebody overseas, or are they kind of where you were, where they're looking to hire somebody in the US?
Great question. I would say that the companies that are, I would say maybe a little bit bigger, farther along, have some more sophistication in terms of like running a business and growing headcount. They've sort of, this isn't anything new for them, and they already do it. I would say where I see the market sort of like waking up to this is the SMBs that are, I would say, in the, I don't even know, $1 million a year, $1 to $3 million a year in revenue, even obviously below that, is like this. I feel like this has been such a like well-kept secret by the Fortune 1000s for so long. And they had the infrastructure and the ability to do it 5, 10 years ago, even beyond that. But I don't think this is a new thing for the companies that are, 5 mil, 10 mil plus. But for the SMBs, I feel like this is something that they're sort of just like, oh wow, it's something that's finally being revealed to them, that they're witnessing, especially with the advent of COVID and how that's shook things up for everyone, that this is like a viable option in a way that they didn't see even as recently as 12, 18 months ago. I think it's way
Mhm.
different now in terms of the optics.
So, I mean, somebody who's a small business, maybe under 1 million, and they don't want to pay that fee, but they want to find some additional help, some marketing help. What are some of the tripwires that can go wrong if they try to vet and hire somebody overseas to
Yeah,
do
I
some of
would
their work?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest missteps that most people make is they don't have like clarity on the role or what they're trying to give them. And so what that leads them to do is like in terms of the job description that they put together, it's sort of like half baked and it's not
Mhm.
clear to the people, the talent that they're trying to attract. So I think that's one of the biggest missteps is just like lack of clarity internally on what they need someone to do. The second is people hire people all the time. Could be from Upwork, it could be from Indeed, could be from LinkedIn. Doesn't really matter the source. And when talent tends to not be successful, oftentimes what people say is like, oh, like that person is no good, but they never look in the mirror in terms of like, what did I do or what didn't I do to put this person in a position to be successful? And that could be onboarding documentation, that could be SOPs for whatever the talent's supposed to be doing. That could be aligning expectations with the talent in terms of how you expect them to communicate with you, considering that they're not within your four walls, things like that. And I think that's the second biggest misstep in terms of like them having their T's crossed and I's dotted internally to be ready to bring on a person. Honestly doesn't matter if they're in America or international. And then the third piece is I would say like not knowing how to vet the talent that they're looking for. That's the other biggest misstep is like if I'm trying to hire someone to run my Facebook ads, how do I know if they know what they're doing with
Right.
respect to running Facebook ads? They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know how to evaluate if what they're saying is true or BS, because a lot of people don't know Facebook ads themselves. And so and that's probably the hardest one to solve for is what if I'm looking for someone with a specific skill set, what questions do I ask to evaluate if they can do what they say they can do?
Now, is there any sort of guarantee that you guys offer with the vetting that you're like, this person's great, but they turn out not to be?
Yeah, what we do is 90-day replacement guarantee. So if someone gets a person from us and they turn out to suck, right? Meaning they pass all four of our stages of vetting internally, and they pass the vetting of the client that we hook them up with, because the client we'll send the client three options to choose from. So if they fool us four times and the client, we replace them up to 90 days guaranteed. And it's honestly, Andy, it's quite rare that it even gets to that point. I would say probably less than 5%. That's being said, like at the end of the day, we're still dealing with humans, and like we are imperfect. So it does happen, but it's pretty rare. But I've run a service business for a long time, agency and this now, and so it really just comes down to doing right by the client or right by the customer.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do you ever travel and meet any of these individuals in their countries, or
My
is all yours done remotely?
Great question. So my partner is like the one who's boots on the ground in South America, and he's traveling all over the place. I would say to expand our network on the ground, because that's how we'll find the best people relative to just posting on LinkedIn, for example.
Yeah.
And so he's like in Ecuador, in Panama, in Colombia. He's all over the place. I honestly have a hard time keeping track. But that's a great question, and I would say it's probably something we do a little bit different than other folks too. Is just like try and be there and meet and greet, because we're trying to build a pretty unique talent pool of exclusively marketers in these geographic regions. So it kind of gives us a little bit of a leg up.
Now, how does your client, when they hire some remote marketers, how do they pay them? How do they get the money to them for the work they provided?
Yeah, so we use I can't remember the type of the software that it's called, but we'll use something like Remote or Deal or JustWorks, like a provider that sort of handles all of I would say the legal component of hiring
Mhm.
a contractor in one of these geographies, and just setting it up from a payment standpoint to be able to send money in a very, I would say, frictionless way.
Now, when it comes to the taxes of the business,
Yeah.
how does that affect, payroll withholdings?
Yeah, so
Um,
we don't there isn't as much of that stuff in these foreign countries. Like, and obviously it's nuanced country to country, and I'm not a tax expert, but what I can say is that there's a lot more red tape if these people are hired as employees of the American company. And obviously there's more red tape if there becomes a concentration of employees in one country. But usually what I tend to see, again, this is what I would say is like the 95-5 distribution of it all, is that the talent prefers to be hired as contractors because they have more freedom within their countries from a reporting standpoint and so on. And a lot of them don't even want to be hired as full-time employees as in the eyes of the government. And it's easier for the American companies as well. So that's what people tend to do, is hire them as contractors and pay them through a third-party platform like JustWorks or Deal or Remote.
Yeah. With the Latin Americans, kind of fascinating. So we've at our agency have hired people in the Philippines a lot. And, we're hiring them for 8 hours, but they might have a second gig where
Right.
they're working another 4, 5, 6, 8 hours. So they're working like 16-hour days. Is that common with Latin American remote force as well?
I see it less so. Partially, I think also it comes down to like what's the role that that someone's in, I guess, and like what's the comp. And if you think about it, Andy, I like objectively, would someone prefer to work two jobs or one? Usually, I would say they probably choose one. If they're working two, it's because there's like the financial need in order to work more. But I think you find those things play out within either certain geos, like the Philippines, for example, and or certain roles. So I think so from what I've seen within LATAM, and because we're going for more specialized talent that isn't just like they're 1 year experience and they have eyes and hands and can click around on the internet. They tend to be, I would say, like more specialized, therefore more, I'll use professional in that they have a full-time job just like an ordinary employee would here, and that's the company that they work for. So obviously it happens, but I think it's less common.
And how does the pay range? How do you determine competitive salaries?
So I think it really just comes down to like what's the market, like with anything else. Like, if there's email marketers in America and it's for a role, it's $70,000 in let's just say Colombia, for example, it might be 35,000. So look at what the market is. So one thing it's partially a loaded question because there's obviously what the market is, but then the other element is like how sophisticated is this person? Like what is their expertise? What is their track record? How long have they been in the game? What have they done before? And so I think it's more of a spectrum. And so it obviously depends on the role and what the market rate is for that role, and then the expertise and the tenure of the individual.
So
So
who
it's sort of like a feel thing to a degree. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So who do you guys work with? I mean, who's out there? If they're listening, they should contact you, and how would they do it?
I would say agencies, that's an easy one, just because they always need marketing talent. But even companies that have do their marketing internally or subsection thereof. So let's say, for example, what's very common is there's a company, could be an agency even, or a business, and they have senior level marketing roles, like someone that's doing the strategy, someone that's running the where we're allocating the dollars for ads, for example, but they don't have time to be in the account or pulling reports and doing analysis and so forth. What we found is like those sort of like supporting marketing roles that aid the efforts of someone that's more senior, more strategic, tend to work really well, regardless of agency or if they're selling B2B or even consumer businesses.
Well, this has been great. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up today?
Now, if you have questions, hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn at the Phil Rivers or talenthq.co.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, Phil.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate you.
For listeners, remember, if you like this episode, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us an honest review. And if you're looking for more information on Phil or Talent HQ, you will find links in the show notes below. In addition, if you're looking for more information on growing your business, check out our podcast resource center available at podcast.makeeachclickcount.com. We can compile all our different past guests by show topic and include each of their contact information in case you would like any more information, any of the services discussed in previous episodes. Well, that's it for today. Remember to stay safe, keep healthy, and happy marketing. And I'll talk to you in the next episode.